All right, let's get a move on here. I got abruptly cut off last time, just because the memory on my iPad had filled up. I need to clear out some things, but let's continue where we left off. We had been talking about the mountains and rivers and the geography of things, which was way cool. Then we've been talking about the poetry and couplets that are common, and let's see here, adventure in Jerusalem. So now that we talked about the desert and the sand, we're talking about the city. And I'm just going to start it a little bit earlier, just like a paragraph or so, which says, thoroughly typical also is the hiding out of young men in caves near the city while they waited for Laban's henchmen to cool off and debated with oriental heat and passion their next move. That's 1 Nephi 3, 27 through 28. Since the Palestine Exploration Fund Quarterly started to appear many years ago, its readers have been treated to a constant flow of official reports on newly discovered caves in and near Jerusalem. The country is peppered with them. For the area southwest of the city, it is difficult to give an account of the principal excavations of this type of caves without appearing to use the language of exaggeration. To attempt a descriptive catalog of these caves would be altogether futile. The mere labor of searching the hills for examples would be almost endless. So, basically, the land around Jerusalem is like Swiss cheese. Farther out, the Beit Jibrin area contains an innumerable number of artificial caves, and the deserts of Tit and Moab swarm with them. Many of these caves, being artificial, are younger than Lehi's time, but many are also older and have been used at all times as hiding places. But who in America knew of these hiding places hundreds of years ago? The purpose of the first return trip to Jerusalem was procuring of certain records which were written on bronze plates. Oh, yeah, this was the brass plates. Ooh, I think I went a little too far back, sorry. And how what they call brass, we call bronze. Got it. They were preserving the children of their language, dealings with Laban. These commandments, rabbis, career authority, depending on constant deception and intrigue. So I was laughing all about how the politicians are the same, whether it's back in Laban's time or our time. The recounting of the... Yes, this is right where I'm at. I'm sorry. So, Jerusalem is like Swiss cheese, and politicians are the same everywhere. Got it. And then I was right in the middle of this quote. And it says... well, let me actually read this. Okay, so they went to the house of Laban. They said they would slay him. Later, the brothers returned to Laban, laden with their family treasure, foolishly hoping to buy the plates from him. They might have known what would happen. Quote, and it came to pass that when Laban saw our property, that it was exceeding great, he did lust after it, insomuch that he thrust us out, and sent his servants to slay us, that he might obtain our property. And it came to pass that we did flee before the servants of Laban, and were obliged to leave behind our property, and it fell into the hands of Laban. Compare this with the now classic story of Wenamon's interview with the rapacious Zakar Baal, governor of Byblos, almost exactly 500 years before. The Egyptian entered the great man's house, found him sitting in his upper chamber, leaning his back against a window, even as Laman accosted Laban as he sat in his house. When his visitor desired of the merchant prince and prince of merchants that he part with some cedar logs, the latter flew into a temper and accused him of being a thief. Behold, thou art a robber, just like Laban says, demanding that he produce his credentials. Zakar Baal then had the journal of his fathers brought in, and had them read it before him, from which it is plain that the important records of the city were actually stored at his house and kept on tablets. From this ancient journal of his fathers, the prince proved to Wenamon that his ancestors had never taken orders from Egypt, and, though the envoy softened his hosts somewhat by reminding him that Ammon, the Lord of the universe, rules over all kings, and the hard-dealing official thrust him out, and later even sent his servants after him, not, however, to slay him, but with the more generous afterthought of bringing him something in the way of refreshment as he sat sorrowing. With cynical politeness, the prince offered to show Wenamun the graves of some other Egyptian envoys whose missions had not been too successful. And when the business deal was finally completed, Zakarba'al, on a legal technicality, turned his guest over to the mercies of a pirate fleet lurking outside the harbor. Stand up guys, people, stand up guys. And all the time he smiled and bowed, for after all, Wenamun was an Egyptian official, whereas Lehi's sons lost their bargaining power when they lost their fortune. The Laban story is just an eloquent commentary on the ripeness of Jerusalem for destruction. Yeah, frankly, I mean, if that's the culture, it's literally... it is the culture of corruption. That's just how you got things done around then, right? Yeah, but that's so unfortunate. A few deft and telling touches resurrect the pompous Laban with photographic perfection. Hoo 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 hoo! Does he have a wart on the end of his nose? No, probably not, but anyways. We learn in passing that he commanded a garrison of 50, that he met in full ceremonial armor with the elders of the Jews for secret consultations by night, that he had control of a treasury, that he was of the old aristocracy, being a distant relative to Lehi himself, that he probably held his job because of his ancestors, since he hardly received it by merit, that his house was the storing place of very old records, that he was a large man, short-tempered, crafty, and dangerous, and to the bargain cruel, greedy, and unscrupulous, weak, and given to drink. I'd agree with most of those, but if we take it at the word of why would he be in his armor at night, cavorting with people, and it's likely the Passover, because it's in spring, it all comes together that he was probably just an Israelite leader of the Josephite lineage, Ephraim Manasseh lineage. And so, although basically all that applies because of how he treated Nephi, I think the one thing that fills in gaps is the idea that, hey, it was the reason you're in ceremonial armor at night doing this stuff has to do with it being Passover, more than just, I'm cavorting and conniving at night, rah, rah, rah. It's a little, just a tinge more innocent than giving him just a little more light than just, Snidely whiplash. He wasn't sitting there doing that. But anyways, everything else kind of fits. I mean, all of which makes him a Rabu to the life, the very model of an Oriental pasha. Yep, politician? Yeah, totally makes sense. He is cut from the same cloth as Jaush, his contemporary and probably his successor as military governor of this whole region, in control of the defenses along the western frontier of Judah, and an intermediary with the authorities of Jerusalem, or as Hoshea, apparently the leader of the military company situated at some outpost near the main road from Jerusalem to the coast, whose character was one of fawning servility. Dude, there's so many literary ideas that pop into mind of these captains of the guard kind of stuff that are unscrupulous, that they're tyrants, they're small tyrants over what little jurisdiction they have, and yet sniveling and servile to whoever is over them. Anyways, so that's how it's being painted here. I would think of him more as just one of the elders of the tribe and leader of the garrison, sure. But having the records and everything just points to, I think everything really does point to more along the lines of it was Passover. He was in ceremonial armor and such because, yeah, he was the captain because of heritage and whatever else. Yes, he was absolutely corrupt. I get that. But I would also add to it that it was the I think it very worthwhile to have the understanding of it being Passover and have the understanding that that's why it makes sense that he has the records. It makes sense that he is the one they have to go to, and the position that he's in. It fills in on that all. And does it soften how he is? In a way, it does, because instead of just thinking of him as a snidely whiplash, evil, twisty mustache character, we actually see that, yes, he is still a very unscrupulous person, but it's because of his position, which he landed into. It helps answer the question of why did he have all this stuff, and why was he dressed the way that he was, and what put him in that position, instead of just thinking that he came from nowhere and was, it just fills in his backstory more. That's all. Sorry. Fawning servility. There we are. As to the garrison of 50, it seems pitifully small for a great city. It would have been just as easy for the author of 1 Nephi to have said 50,000 and made it really impressive. Yet the older brothers, though they wish to emphasize Laban's great power, mention only 50. That's 1 Nephi 3:31. And it is Nephi in answering them who says that the Lord is mightier than Laban and his 50, and adds on, or even than his tens of thousands. As a high military commander, Laban would have his tens of thousands in the field, but as such, an array is of no concern to Laman and Lemuel. It is the 50 that they must look out for, the regular permanent garrison of Jerusalem. So right now, Hugh Nibley is pointing this out as like the regular garrison, and it very well could be. But I'm sitting here thinking, what if that's just his personal guards as a politician? That he's not some just low-ranking commander, but instead he is a politician or a leader of a tribe, and those are his regular servants and guards. Because like I said, there wasn't the idea of a third-party police force. I doubt that has... to me, I think of that as coming from England. After the hue and cry kind of thing where people arrested other people and turned them in as good citizens, that it then became a actual third-party police force. And we generally think of guards of the city as being the generic police force, and I agree. That's kind of true, but only kind of. Because who would be the guards of a city? I would think the guards of a city would either be employed by the greatest ruler in the city. What was his name in Roman times? They had horrible histories on it. He was like the richest guy in Rome, and he would buy if your house was on fire, he owned the fire station. And so he'd be like, look, your house is burning down. I'll buy it from you for absolutely real cheap because you're going to have nothing. And he's like, fine, here. And then after doing that, of course, he put out the fire with his firemen, and then he bought your property at a steal and could rebuild it. Marcus Licinius Crassus, no man could divus a pessus. That's it. This guy was really rich. He had his own army, right? And so he was the one who enforced things. He owned the fire stations or the fire brigade. He owned the army. And it's like, okay, what's the point of having guards at the city? Where would you have guards? I think a lot of a city would be just mostly anarchy. You avoid the places that you know you're going to be robbed, or you defend yourself. There's a reason why you had the good parts of the code of chivalry for a long time. Anyways, sorry, this is my reflection on that. It's something that I'd love to dive in deeper of what was the method of justice among a city if you didn't have a dedicated police force? And who would take care of it and why? Right? Unless a leader provided that and paid for it, what's the point? And who would take care of it? It becomes very fascinating when you don't have this idea, the embedded structure of, well, the government provides for it. Well, who was the government before our representative government was made? And who would they really be looking out for? Anyways, that's why I keep thinking, yeah, Laban has his 50, but is that because that's just his guard that he has for himself as a high-ranking member of the Josephite tribe, or is he just truly a military guy? But then why would he have the records? Do you see why I think it's important to sit there and say, wait, he may have been a tribe leader, that's why he has the records, and they're in his possession, and that he was out at night in his armor because it was a specific festival, which was Passover. So, sorry. I know I keep talking on this point, but that's why. So, Marcus Licinius Cressus, no man could ever surpass us. Anyways, the number of 50 suits perfectly with Amarna picture, where the military forces are always so surprisingly small, and a garrison of 30 to 80 men is thought adequate even for big cities. It is strikingly vindicated in a letter to Nebuchadnezzar, Lehi's contemporary, wherein the great king orders, as to the 50s who are under your command, those come to the rear, or fugitives return to their ranks. Commenting on this, Offord says, in these days it is interesting to note that the indication here that in the Babylonian army a platoon contained 50 men. Also we might add that it was called a 50, hence Laban with his 50. And that's what I was also going to point out, is that, dude, look, if there were certain things that were different from how we have today, including what are the unit sizes. So, anyway. Of course, companies of 50 are mentioned in the Bible, along with tens and hundreds, etc., but not as garrisons of great cities, and not as the standard military unit of this time. Laban, like Hoshea of Lachish, and a single company of soldiers under him, as the permanent garrison, like Jaush, his possible successor, worked in close cooperation with the authorities in Jerusalem. So he's basically saying that the standard military unit is 50. So, point for him, but I would still say the same for me. I don't know. I don't want to yield on that. Returning by night in a third attempt to get the records, Nephi stumbled upon the prostrate form of Laban lying dead drunk in the deserted street. The commander had been, so his servant later told Nephi in conference, with the elders of the Jews, out by night among them, and was wearing his full dress armor. So maybe he is... anyway, like I said, these are little details that are really fun, and I think it's important to think that even if he was just a commander instead of a high-ranking tribesman of the Josephite. Anyway, what world of inference is this? Oh, let's see what he has to say. Here are his inferences. We sense the gravity of the situation in Jerusalem, which the elders are still trying to conceal. We hear the suppressed excitement of Zoram's urgent talk as he and Nephi hasten through the streets to the city gates, and from Zoram's willingness to change sides and leave the city, we can be sure that he is, as Laban's secretary, knew how badly things were going. From Lachish letters, it is clear that informed parties in Jerusalem were quite aware of the critical state of things at Jerusalem, even while the Serim, the elders, are working with all their might to suppress every sign of criticism and dissatisfaction. How they could take counsel to provide for the defense of the city and their own interests without exciting alarms or giving rise to general rumors and misgivings. By holding their meeting in secret, of course, such midnight sessions of civil and military leaders as Laban had just been attending. With great reluctance, but urged persistently by the voice of the Spirit, Nephi took Laban's own sword and cut off his head with it. This episode is viewed with horror and incredulity by people who recently approved and applauded the far less merciful slaughter of far more innocent men on the islands of the Pacific. Ooh. Hoo. Samuel ibn Adit, remember this was written in 1953. So he's just talking about the war that we had with Japan. And there might be a specific instance that he's referring to that I'm unaware of, instead of the overall arching of Japan versus the US. But Samuel ibn Adit, the most famous Jewish poet of Arabia in ancient times, won undying fame in the East by allowing his son to be cruelly put to death before his eyes rather than give up some costly armor, which had been entrusted to his care by a friend. The story, true or not, is a reminder that Eastern and Western standards are not the same, and that's what he's pointing out. And that the callousness of Americans in many matters of personal relationships would shock Arabs far more than anything they do shock us. The Book of Mormon is no more than the Bible confined to mild and pleasant episodes. It is, for the most part, a sad and grievous tale of human folly. No one seems more disturbed by the demise of Laban, however, than Nephi himself, who takes great pains to explain his position. First, he was constrained by the Spirit to kill Laban, but he said in his heart that he had never shed human blood, and became sick at the thought. I shrunk and would that I might not slay him. The Spirit spoke again, and to its prompting, Nephi adds his own reasons. I also knew that he had sought to take away my own life, yea, and he would not hearken unto the commandments of the Lord, and he had also taken away our property. But this was all still not enough. The Spirit spoke again, explaining the Lord's reasons, and assuring Nephi that he would be in the right, to which Nephi appends more arguments of his own, remembering the promise that his people would prosper only by keeping the commandments of the Lord. And I also thought that they could not keep the commandments, save they should have the law, which the dangerous and criminal Laban alone kept them from having. And again I know that the Lord had delivered Laban into my hands for this cause. Therefore I did obey the voice of the Spirit. At long last Nephi finally did the deed, of which he is careful to clear himself, putting the responsibility for the whole thing on the Lord. If the Book of Mormon were a work of fiction, nothing would be easier than to have Laban already dead when Nephi found him, or simply omit an episode which obviously distressed the writer quite as much as it does the reader, though the slaying of Laban is no more reprehensible than was the beheading of the unconscious Goliath. From time to time, the claim is put forth that the story of Laban's death is absurd. Before I get into this paragraph, okay, so he's trying to take on the sensibilities that some people have. I hope he goes into the other half of it where it's like, dude, you different culture. But more importantly, when it came to his idea is that Laban was out at night planning because they knew that destruction was coming, and that there are letters from Lacanus, the outside, that kind of show that they knew what was going on. And so maybe they're doing midnight. He's thinking that they're doing midnight planning because destruction's coming and they want to quell any dissent and make sure that people still back Egypt, that kind of stuff, which obviously led to the persecution of Lehi and is part of the reason why he left. But I don't know. I still think that they may have known, but I don't think they were doing furtive planning. I think it really was Passover. I think there are reasons that Nephi specifically is putting that in there, because if you read the last 116 pages, you get the idea that this was Nephi's exodus, and so he was showing that it was done in all these important ways and on these important dates. And the reason I back that up is because God is really good at using specific dates that he set down in Jewish festivals to have things happen in the restored gospel. So, like the Feast of Trumpets, when Joseph Smith retrieved the plates from the ground, he doesn't forget these dates. And so if Nephi and Lehi and all of them are doing their own personal exodus to their own promised land as a branch of the Josephite tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, then it makes sense that God would have it happen on these days. He's not forgetful of this stuff. So that's why I'm sticking to it. Like, I appreciate his inferences, and they do make sense. But if you add in that, hey, this is spring, and hey, why would he have the plates in the first place? Etc., etc. If you get my drift. Okay. All right, so from time to time, the claim is put forth that the story of Laban's death is absurd, if not impossible. It is said that Nephi could not have killed Laban and made his escape. Those who are familiar with night patrolling in wartime, however, will see in Nephi's tale the convincing and realistic account. Remember, this was 1953. People knew war at this time. In the first place, the higher critics are apparently not aware that the lighting of city streets, except for festivals, is a blessing unknown to ages other than our own. Hundreds of passages might be cited from ancient writers, classical and oriental, to show that in the times gone by, the streets of even the biggest towns were perfectly dark at night and very dangerous. To move about late at night without lamp bearers and armed guards was to risk almost certain assault. In the famous trial of Alcibiades, for the mutilation of Hermes, we have the testimony of one witness who all alone beheld by moonlight the midnight depredations of a drunken band in the heart of downtown Athens, from which it is clear that the streets of the greatest city in the Western world were unlighted, deserted, and dangerous at night. In times of social unrest, the streets at night were virtually given over to the underworld, as they were in some European cities during the blackouts of the late war. See what I'm talking about? This is stuff that's foreign to us completely, until someone points it out. The extreme narrowness of ancient streets made their blackout doubly effective. From the Greek and Roman comedy, and from the poets, we learn how heavily barred and closely guarded the doors of private houses had to be at night. Yep. And archaeology has shown us eastern cities in which apparently not a single house window opened onto the public street, as few do today at ground level. East and west, the inmates simply shut themselves in at night, as if in a besieged fortress. Think of inner cities that, places that have really gone downhill. The dangerous neighborhoods of whatever city you're in, the ones that have bars over windows, even though you're sitting there going like, what happens if your house goes on fire? How do you escape? You're like, well, bars on the windows to keep people from coming in. It is true in any age. We are not so different. The only problem is that we've lived in a lot of prosperity and a lot of safety for a long time. That most of us don't know that unless you've lived in those neighborhoods. Archaeology has shown us the eastern cities in which apparently not a single house window opened to the public street, as few even do today at ground level. East and west, the inmates simply shut themselves in at night as in a besieged fortress. Even Shakespeare's day, we see the comical terror of the night watch passing through the streets at hours when all honest people are behind doors. Think of the Shakespearean plays that have a night watch. In a word, the streets of any ancient city after sundown were a perfect setting for the committing of deeds of violence without fear of detection. It was very late when Nephi came upon Laban, 1 Nephi 4, 5, and 22. The streets were deserted and dark. Let the reader imagine what he would do if he were on patrol near enemy headquarters during a blackout and stumbled on the unconscious form of some notoriously bloodthirsty enemy general. By the brutal code of war, the foe has no claim to a formal trial, and it is now or never. Laban was wearing armor, so the only chance of dispatching him quickly, painlessly, and safely was to cut off his head. The controversial treatment of criminals in the East, where beheading has always been by the sword, and where an executioner would be fined for failing to decapitate his victim at one clean stroke. Nephi drew the sharp, heavy weapon and stood over Laban for a long time, debating this course. He was an expert hunter and a powerful man, with due care, such as one could not do a quick and efficient job and avoid getting much blood on himself. But why should he worry about that? There was not one chance in 1,000 of meeting any honest citizen, and in the dark no one would notice the blood anyway. What they would notice would be the armor that Nephi put on, and which, like the sword, could easily be wiped clean. The donning of the armor was natural and shrewd thing for Nephi to do. A number of instances from the last war could be cited to show that a spy in the enemy camp is never so safe as when he is wearing the insignia of a high military official, provided he does not hang around too long, and Nephi had no intention of doing that. No one dares challenge Big Brass too closely, least of all a grim and hot-tempered Laban. Their business is at all times top secret, and their uniform gives them complete freedom to come and go unquestioned. Don't you see the perspective that is so different? Here I hold on to my, it was Passover, because I really, really believe Don Bradley. He has a great argument for it. Yet at the same time, Hugh Nibley, this is just less than 10 years from when World War II ended. This is still his mindset. This is the lived experience of these people at the time, and that's why their mindset is dead set on this, and that's how they infer things. Nephi tells us that he was led by the Spirit. He was not talking impossible chances, but being in a tight place, he followed the surest formula of those who have successfully carried off ticklish assignments. His audacity and speed were rewarded, and he was clear of the town before anything was discovered. In his whole exploit, there is nothing in the least improbable. How Nephi disguised himself in the clothes of Laban and tricked Laban's servant into admitting him to the treasury is an authentic bit of Oriental romance, and the history as well. One need but think of Sir Richard Burton's amazingly audacious masquerades in the East, carried on in broad daylight and for months on end with perfect success. Do we even know who Sir Richard Burton is? That's someone I'm going to be looking up today. When Zoram the servant discovered that it was not his master with whom he had been discussing the highly secret doings of the elders as they walked to the outskirts of the city, he talks about it as being secret. But if you read the actual thing, it seems like... Let me actually pull out my phone. Let's go to... That's... I need Book of Mormon. I need 1 Nephi. Let's go to chapter 4. Okay. Behold his sword. Prosper promise. And I commanded him in the voice of Laban that he should go with me to the treasury, supposed me to be his master. He beheld the garments and the sword, and he spake unto me concerning this is what it is. And he spake unto me concerning the elders of the Jews, he knowing that the master Laban had been out by night among them. And I spake unto him as if it had been Laban. And I spoke unto him that I should carry the engravings which were upon the plates of brass to my elder brethren, who were without the walls. And he supposing that I spake of the brethren of the church, and that I was truly Laban whom I had slain, wherefore he did follow me. Okay. And he spake unto me many times concerning the elders of the Jews, as I went forth to my brethren who were without the walls. So, it doesn't say he was talking about secret things, just he was talking about the elders of the Jews, which he knew he was among. And so, it could be either way. Obviously, Hugh Nibley is talking about military stuff, because that's what they just came out of World War II, and he's thinking about, Laban commands 50, he's got to be a military guy, what's he doing out in his armor at night? He's got to be doing secret planning, because that's where his mindset is. Whereas Don Bradley talks about why would he be okay with taking records to elders of the church late at night. Again, when you sit there and think of it as being Passover, which is, really late night festivals, talking with elders of the Jews and talking about high members of the church all in one makes a lot more sense. So, sorry, I still think it's the Passover. So, that's why I take umbrage with his assertion that he was talking about the secret things he was doing with the elders. I think it was Passover because it doesn't say he was talking about trying to do top secret stuff. Anyway, plus it would make more sense to be able to talk about something that was common. Like, you're talking about partying around the water cooler at work. Everyone kind of knows, oh, well, yeah, oh, this game, the Piggers are doing really great this year. Piggers are going to go all the way. Anyways, you can get a sense of everything in generic terms by the common stuff that you have relatable in your own life. All right. I better watch my time. Okay, so I still got plenty of time. So, he was seized with terror, as well he might be. In such a situation, there was only one thing Nephi could possibly have done, both to spare Zoram and to avoid giving alarm. And no Westerner could have guessed what it was. Nephi, a powerful fellow, held the terrified Zoram in a vice-like grip long enough to swear a solemn oath in his ear, "As the Lord liveth, and as I live," that he would not harm him if he would listen. Zoram immediately relaxed, and Nephi swore another oath to him that he would be a free man if he would join the party. "Therefore, if thou wilt go down into the wilderness to my father, thou shalt have a place with us." We have already considered the correctness of the expression "go down" and "have place," as well as the necessity of having Zoram address himself to no one but Nephi's father. What astonishes the Westerner reader is the miraculous effect of Nephi's oath on Zoram, who, upon hearing a few conventional words, promptly becomes tractable. While as for the brothers, as soon as Zoram made an oath unto us that he would tarry with us from that time forth, our fears did cease concerning him. The reaction of both parties makes sense when one realizes that the oath is the one thing that is most sacred and inviolable among the desert people. Hardly will an Arab break his oath, even if his life be in jeopardy. Oh, God, I wish. Sometimes that's the only thing that keeps people together, is the idea of that something that causes trust. Whether that's a contract enforced by a just authority or oaths that are held together by strong social bonds. That's how you make the world go round. Anyway. There's nothing stronger and more sacred than the oath among the nomads. And hardly an Arab, there's nothing stronger than more sacred than the oath among the nomads, and even among the city Arabs, if it be extracted under special conditions. But not every oath will do. To be most binding and solemn, an oath should be by the life of something, even if it be but a blade of grass. The only oath more awful than by my life, or less commonly by the life of my head, is the word Wahayat Allah, by the life of God, or as the Lord liveth. The Arabic equivalent of the ancient Hebrew Hay Elohim. Today, it is glibly employed by the city riffraff, but anciently it was an awful thing, as it still is among the desert people. I confirmed my answer in The Bedouin Wise, says Dougherty. By his life, he said, well, swear by the life of Allah, God. I answered and said thus, even the nomads use in a greater occasion, but they say, by the life of thee in a little matter. So we see that the one and only way that Nephi could have pacified the struggling Zoram in an instant was to utter the one oath that no man would dream of breaking, the most solemn of all oaths to the Semite, as the Lord liveth, and as I live. I'm pausing for dramatic effect. I'm also pausing because that brings up an interesting point. Okay, so in John Butler's book, John Butler, or Dave Butler, or John, or Dijon, like the mustard. In the language of Adam, Dave Butler or John Butler, depending on how you want to say it, Mr. Butler, makes the point that having an oath, there are oaths that are done by the people who have are Gadianton robbers, right? The secret combination oaths are the antithesis to what is taught by Jesus Christ. But we can see that, like, let me go to Matthew chapter 5 here real quick, and you'll see what I mean. And you'll see why this is interesting to me that he said, as the Lord liveth and as I liveth. And Hugh Nibley is saying that was like the oath of oaths. And it would have been, this is 600 BC. So Matthew chapter 5. You're the light of the world. Yay, yay, and nay, nay. Come on. Yay! Here we are. Verse 33, chapter 5 of Matthew. Again, ye have heard that it hath been said of them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither thou shalt swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair of white or black, but let your communications be yea, yea, and nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. And Dave Butler puts that in also in a temple sense, as you go through and commit your oaths of, I'm going to sacrifice, and I'm going to obey God. I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to follow the law of the gospel. I'm going to be chaste and have consecration. We just say yes, right? And so Dave Butler puts that in a temple setting. And I would say he also adds to it the idea that, look, if you say, look at all these things that you say you shouldn't swear by, which is God's thrones, his footstool, and his cities. He goes on and quotes the spots where you have the Gadianton robbers doing oaths, whether that's like back with Cain and Satan in Eden, or whether it's further on. Anytime that there's something that's kind of mentioned, they'll easily give promises and oaths that they will break. And frankly, that Satan ends up breaking anyway, because it's like, oh yes, just pledge yourself unto me. Anyway, so you can think of oaths that are based on other things, other objects, people, places, as kind of the antithesis of what God wants for how you agree to do things. Because if the higher law is to just say, your word be your bond, and you just say, I will do this, you go and do that to the fullest extent of your ability, that became kind of the Western standard over time. And I would hope that it sticks around, but depends on when society degenerates. Kids these days, hey! But at the same time, if Nephi is saying, as the Lord liveth, and as I live, and it was meant to be, I hope it's meant not in the same way that it's like I'm swearing on my own head, because it's similar, but I think it's different enough. And I'm trying to justify my thoughts here, because it's just weird to me that it's as if he's saying, let's see here, the dealings with Laban, going down. The solemn oath, as the Lord liveth and as I live, I won't harm you. So that's, it's not saying like I'm swearing by the hair of my head, or I swear that if I don't get you, I'll kill myself. There's stuff like that in the Book of Mormon. When you get to the really bad guys in the Alma chapters about the war, when they wanted revenge, they did those oaths. They did the oaths where it's like, I swear by the earth and the heavens and my head. Like everything that is the antithesis of what God said you should do these things in Sermon on the Mount. And they do the exact opposite. They say, oh, you say don't do these things? Great, we're going to go do them. And they do that in those chapters. And it's very fascinating that they do. Whereas this, I'm like, they're not swearing by the hair of their head. They're just saying, as the Lord liveth, and as I liveth. Basically saying, because these things are constant, I'm alive, right? I'm here, and God is eternal. I am telling you, I am giving you this sacred oath. Hugh Nibley puts it in the way that it is by the life of these things, which is interesting. And so I leave it to you to decide. How do you interpret that? I like to interpret it as something softer than the ones that are the antithesis of how God wants us to swear. Hugh Nibley's makes it sound more like it was closer to swearing on your own life or the life of the Lord, which doesn't seem quite right to me. It doesn't sit right. But at the same time, it's basically just saying, as the Lord liveth and as I live. I think it touches on that enough as of the absolute seriousness that Nephi had, and the deference as the culture holds to such very sacred things. It's like, I know this is a stupid secular example, but in the Christmas story back, you showed that whenever somebody triple dog dare you, you had to do it, kind of thing. And we will hold different values to different oaths as a culture instinctively, as long as it is held to by the culture. My question is that how often do we see such promises and forswearing as common nowadays? I don't think we do. Because I think besides the whole, triple dog dare you from a Christmas story, which I'm sure is going to be fading in popularity and knowledge soon, just because unless it's passed down, it'll become this niche thing and, maybe some sort of tradition. But eventually that's going to fade and snuff out and be replaced by newer movies that everyone finds as traditional. As soon as the popularity goes down far enough, no one else is going to be circulating it. So I don't think, unless there are pockets of kids still going out there and daring people, and then we've probably actively taught our kids, don't be stupid if they're daring you to do stupid stuff. Even if they triple dog dare you, you can just sit there and say, well, whatever, who cares? But in the same way, because we've taught that, because we have shown that you ignore stupid people asking you to do stupid things, well, I can't say it's all gone. It's just taken a different form. Now it's the ice bucket challenge or the cinnamon challenge or other things that you find on the internet. Stupid peer pressure still continues to this day. It's just instead of triple dog dare, it's like, I challenge so-and-so and I challenge so-and-so. Dang it. But do we have anything culturally that upholds the idea of oaths? That I solemnly swear I'm up to no good from Harry Potter, but that was kind of as a joke. But is there any real references culturally upholding people who promise things? I would love to know if you have any idea of something that culturally shows an upholding of oaths instead of just, peer pressure challenges. I'd love to know it. I wonder if we've lost that mechanism over time just because of our attitude towards ignore people doing stupid things. And that's why there are people who buck those trends or go in on those trends because they think it's fun, just because it's like a dare. All right, there's my musings. So we've covered them raiding the city, that it was absolutely entirely possible for Nephi to go unnoticed because the city was pitch black, which that's a good point I'd never thought of. And then the other parts that I hadn't thought of is how much you would make your own home like a fortress just out of necessity, because again, it hit me. What's the police force in a city, and how effective would it be? And who actually is behind it? Especially before there was such a thing as a third-party police force. Followed by which, how do you protect yourself in the bad side of town when all of the town is the bad side of town? All fascinating things I had not considered before. Well, hopefully this enriches your understanding as it does mine, and God be with you.